Hi folks. Well, today we're going to talk about basic essays. This is really about kind of the 5-paragraph essay, which is a staple of American writing and generally Western writing. So this is kind of a big overall of the structure of an essay. As you can see, you have three main parts. You have an introduction, body. It says times 3 because in a 5-paragraph essay you generally have 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And then you can see the different constituent parts in each section, and we're going to talk about those in greater detail in this presentation. Okay, on the next slide you'll see an example of a where are we? Okay. On the next slide you'll see an example of a 5-paragraph essay. Now it's probably too small for you to see in this video, and probably even in the PowerPoint, but you also have a handout, and it begins on page 2 on our handout and goes to page 3. What I'd like you to do right now is to look through that and try to identify the different pieces. For example, this one actually has 4 body paragraphs, but try to pick out the introduction, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. Also take a look at the different paragraphs and see how they're different, especially the difference between the introduction paragraph, the body paragraphs, and the concluding paragraph. Pause now and take a look at that. So your introduction has a very specific format. It's meant to introduce the topic. It's meant to make it interesting to your target reader, so that they want to read the rest of the essay. And so to do this, generally we have about 4 different kinds of introductions. There are probably more of these, but these are 4 popular ones. One is referred to as a funnel introduction, the other interesting story, surprising facts, and historical background. Now the overall purpose is to get your readers interested and give them any information they need before they start. And so read the examples in your packet. It says on the packet it says page 60 and 61. So let's see, I have to go there as well. And so what you'll see here is an example of the funnel and the story, the interesting facts, and historical background. So take a look at all those examples. Can you think of different reasons why you would use each of those? So let's take a look at the funnel introduction here. Now, what you'll notice is that at the beginning they're talking about something very general, and that is just simply about moving to a new country and how it can be exciting. This could be the beginning of any number of essays. However, you'll see them start to focus more and more and more, and so they start to build a description of culture shock in the beginning. And so they play on these common experiences that people have when they go abroad and some feelings of discomfort that they have. And then by the end, they're being very, very specific and stating that there are basically 5 stages of culture shock. Now, from this statement, we know that the essay is going to have essentially probably 5 body paragraphs describing each of those stages. Another type of introduction is the dramatic, interesting, or funny story. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's simply a story, something that people might find interesting. Oftentimes it's scary or funny or just plain related to your context, maybe a story about your hometown or people that you know. But the important thing to remember here is it's not just an interesting story, because the story itself has to be in some way directly related to the thesis. Now if you take a look at this example, they're talking about the experience that this boat crew had on seeing essentially this island grow out of nowhere. But in the end, the actual thesis is this offered scientists an extraordinary opportunity to study how life takes hold on a sterile landmass. So the introduction isn't really about how life grows, but it's just about how the canvas was created, about how the land was created, and then they're going to continue talking about how life grows on a land such as this. So the relationship is, it's not obvious, but they're still related, and that's what you have to keep in mind if you want to make a story like that. The next model is surprising statistics or facts. Now, this is probably one that you're going to use most often in academic or research papers, because what you're doing is providing relevant information to your reader in terms of things that have been discovered in other studies or reasons why you're studying this phenomenon. But most importantly here, you want these to be surprising. Surprising means interesting, and it grabs people's attention. And so for this example here, they're talking about the relationship between seemingly bad foods and good health outcomes. And that's enough to catch anyone's attention, particularly me, because I eat a lot of chocolate and I hope that it's healthy. It's not. But what happens then in the end is that they go from these really interesting pieces of information to a specific thesis. There are so many conflicting news stories about which foods are good for you that it is often difficult to make the right choices at the supermarket. So the rest of this essay is probably going to be about what? Well, how to make good choices at the supermarket. It's probably not going to be about all the health claims, right? So the information is somewhat related, but at the same time, there is a jump. There's a little bit of a leap of logic here, and that's okay as long as they're similar enough. And the last one is about historical background. And now this is also quite popular, not always in this kind of real historical context when you're talking about the distant past, but oftentimes when you're talking about something more in the recent past, last week, yesterday, the day before. So, but it's a similar use. And that is, you're telling a story from history. Now, generally, you're using something that's chronological order, something that takes place, at this time, then later at this time, then later at this time, and so it's in that chronological order, usually when you're telling some kind of historical story. So it differs a little bit from the interesting story that we talked about before. But when doing this, essentially this story is really directly related to the thesis statement. As you can see here, the thesis at the end is their ability to adjust to life in their adopted land has depended on several factors. And so the story is talking about how they came here and how they started to adapt. And then the specific idea is that there are specific factors that help them to adapt. And so the body paragraphs here are going to talk about some various factors. So in those examples previously, we saw a few different thesis statements. And I didn't talk about that directly, but now we will. The thesis statement is the main idea of your essay. It's kind of like the topic sentence for the paragraph. The main idea is what everything else in the essay is going to try to prove or support. It goes at the end of the introduction, generally, the last sentence. Now, it could appear in other areas, but it's not like the topic sentence, which is really fluid. A topic sentence can go almost anywhere in a paragraph. It's quite unusual for the thesis statement to go anywhere but the end of the introductory paragraph. Again, like the topic sentence, it should be broad enough to require an essay to explain, but narrow enough not to require a much longer piece, like a whole book. So below are some basic examples of thesis statements. Now, we could probably make these better, but these are decent basic examples. Korea has changed greatly in the last 50 years. K-pop has been influenced by many styles of music. I believe that a good teacher must have certain qualities to be successful. Now, these are just guiding ideas, and they will be supported by your other paragraphs, and within those paragraphs, what we talked about before, topic sentences, supporting ideas, descriptions, and so forth. But let's dig a little deeper on this. And let's make sure that these have really explicit subtopics. because the subtopics help you to understand what's going to be in the rest of the essay. So for example, if I provide you with 3 subtopics, you're going to assume that you're going to have probably 3 body paragraphs that are going to describe those subtopics. So for example here, in green are the subtopics. Korea has changed greatly in the last 50 years in terms of industry, living conditions, and culture. So this essay is going to have at least 3 body paragraphs. K-pop has been influenced by many styles of music, including Korean trot, R&B, and boy bands. Again, this one's going to have 3 body paragraphs. And I believe that a good teacher must have certain qualities to be successful: patience, diligence, and integrity. Again, 3 body paragraphs, 1 for patience, 1 for diligence, and 1 for integrity. So these are generally not required for essays, and I'm going to say generally because I mean, in your whole life. But subtopics are required in this class. So I will be grading you based on whether you provide a subtopic for your thesis or not. So along with those subtopics, thesis statements can signal the organization of an essay. So with the following thesis statements, how would the essay be organized? Why don't you pause, take a look at those, and ask yourself that question. So let's take a look here. When teaching English to young learners, 3 strategies can be very helpful. Now this one's pretty simple, so the organization of this essay is probably just going to be 3 body paragraphs describing 3 helpful strategies and maybe why they're helpful. In the second one, there are several differences between ESL and EFL teaching contexts. Well, not only are we going to be looking at 3 differences, but also you know that this is probably going to be some kind of compare and contrast essay, because you're looking at the differences between 2 things. And lastly, baking banana cream pie is easy with the following recipe. So here, not only are you going to learn about the recipe itself, but you know the structure, and the structure here is largely going to be, the procedure. First you do this, then you do this, next you do this. So you can learn a lot just from looking at the thesis statements. So what I'd like you to try to do is write your own now. Our general topic is early English education. And let's think that you're going to write an essay about this topic. Now, early English education means English education for students before elementary school. And so it's generally a slightly controversial idea. Some people think it's a good idea, people think it's a bad idea, and for many different reasons. I want to hear what you think. So write a thesis statement on that topic. Okay. And start the video again when you're finished. Hi folks, this is part 2 of the Basic Essays video tutorial. We've already talked about introductions and more specifically the thesis statements and introductions. And now we're going to talk more about the body paragraphs. Now this is actually just a very brief summary of body paragraphs because essentially they're pretty much the same as the individual paragraphs we talked about before. Now the body paragraph supports the thesis statement, the main idea. So just like the supporting statements described the topic sentences in regular paragraphs, the body paragraphs support the thesis statements in an essay. Now within the body is a set of paragraphs. Now the basic 5-paragraph essay has roughly 3 body paragraphs. Now, of course, you don't always have to have 3 body paragraphs. You can have more and you can have fewer. It's just a general guideline. Each paragraph contains one idea. Of course, this is represented by the topic sentence. So this one idea supports the thesis. So each paragraph contains one idea, and that one idea supports the thesis. These paragraphs should be around 4 to 9 sentences, could be more or less depending on the need, just like with the regular paragraphs that we talked about before. There aren't that many differences. However, one of the differences is that it's not self-contained. And so it is connected to the paragraphs before and after it. This should not be an afterthought. You should be planning this. Okay, and so these are connected either by ideas or words. It's less likely to have conclusion. Now, it's less likely to have a conclusion because it's more likely to have some kind of transition from the paragraph to the next paragraph. And now generally this is going to be either in the last sentence in the first paragraph or the first sentence in the following paragraph. So given the previous topic that we talked about, early English education, why don't you write 3 possible topic sentences based on the subtopics in your thesis statement? Now remember, you made a thesis statement that had 3 subtopics. Those subtopics become topic sentences. They should be nearly identical. In your thesis statement, they may just be represented by one word or a short phrase, but for the topic sentence, you'll make that into some kind of sentence. All right, so take a moment and do that. Now we'll work more with those topic sentences later as we start building our body paragraphs. But for now, let's leave it at that because, like I said, these body paragraphs are very similar to the paragraphs that we spent so much time with before. Let's move on to the conclusion, which is certainly different. Now the conclusion serves the same purpose essentially in an essay as it does in a paragraph. So you'll be doing the following things, but you won't just be doing one, you'll be doing a combination of them. So the conclusion signals the end of the essay. That's often why you see transitions like in conclusion to conclude and so forth. So people want to say that this is the end. It summarizes the thesis and the main supporting ideas. So you're probably going to paraphrase the thesis statement in some way or other. It provides the reader with a final comment on the topic, and some of those are the possible endings, such as a prediction of what might follow. So one could be, if you're talking about early English education, that if we continue to put our children in these early education programs, the quality of their performance in English will improve over time. You have an outcome that has or will happen. Now, an outcome is directly related to what you were just talking about. It's not so much a prediction in this sense. So, or it's something that has already happened. You could say, because of these things, this has happened. Now, in early English education, I can certainly state that because of early English education, students are arriving at 3rd grade elementary school with quite high levels, a high proficiency of English, even in spoken English, which years ago their predecessors did not have. Third is a call to action or a proposed solution. So in this case, we could talk about policy decisions, we could talk about financial support for early education programs, we could talk about more early education in English in public schools, or so forth. And the last part here is to quote an authority or a well-known or loosely connected quote. So now, if you quote a well-known authority, that might be someone who, let's say for example, is a researcher in English education, possibly someone like Krashen. And you might say that early exposure to input in English will overall provide more exposure to language learners and therefore will increase language learning, because of course Krashen is all about exposure. You might also refer to some kind of famous person in a loosely connected sort of way, and so you might talk about historical figures in education like John Dewey or Piaget. You might also refer to just famous figures in history, presidents, kings, humanitarians and so forth. So you can use these even if they're not directly related to your topic, but if they're loosely related and they're kind of motivating and a good way to end an essay, go for it. And that's all for today. That ends our second part of the basic essays lecture. What I would like you to do is go back and take a look at what you've written about early English education and think about how you would make a complete, full essay based on that topic. All right, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.